Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. With the VCTs now well underway around the world, big questions have been raised as to whether these groups are actually at all balanced in the various regions, especially now in the Americas, given Group A have all won their games, and so far Group Omega, or Group B, or Group O, whatever you want to call it, have all lost their games so far. How is this going to trend over time? Are the groups severely unbalanced, and what is this going to mean when it comes to qualifying for the playoffs towards the end of the season? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, the Mercedes-Benz Arena in Shanghai. That is going to be the location of the final 3 days of competition for Masters Shanghai in the early part of June. This is a massive arena, and we can see it right here. I mean, I don't even think that like Crossfire, which is a major kind of esport in China, I don't think they've done an event here either. So this is going to be a big challenge to execute. But China is rather large, if you guys haven't noticed. They have lots of people over there, lots of esports fans, absolutely, and hopefully they can, sell out the arena, put on an absolutely mega job, and hopefully by the time that comes around, the Chinese teams will be slightly more internationally competitive than they presently are. Lots of things though to discuss as well. This here from Tarik, who had a pretty damn nice clip on the split the other day as well, and there was some discussion because Tarik was talking, wasn't he? Wow, why not get me into the team instead of Curry? If you guys need somebody to step in and do a job for the boys, how about, bring me in instead? Of course, Curry's their official substitute. He wanted to be the man, but here's Tarik with a nice little ace here. Absolutely no problems at all. And the question was, what would happen if Tarik joined a team? If he competed again, could he be at that level? And Zekken says, could have happened on XZ. Now, everything that Zekken says, you got to take it with a major pinch of salt, because this guy is trolling basically all the time. But still, I don't know. Could there have been a world in which Zekken and somehow Tarik duoed up on XZ a couple of years ago before everything happened? But I think even when that was happening, he was already a content creator for Sentinels, Tarik. So maybe there's some small element of truth to that. The other thing I wanted to follow up on was what we talked about yesterday. During the Sen 100T series, Zelsys frustrated with the referees for good reason on the audio situation. We talked about it at quite some length yesterday as well, and he mentioned it on stream. But it wasn't just this actually. There was also talk here from this interview with Mace Esports here that was done, and we'll talk about that in a second, from Toys of Loud. Now those guys were in a tough spot because they'd travelled, they were stuck in Northern Ireland, Belfast it seems, probably to get their visa sorted for around 20 days, and they just got in to Los Angeles just in time to play their series. Very tired, no practice, jet lagged, understandable they didn't perform at their level, but still they fell pretty flat against NRG given what Sentinels did with Gen.G turning up last minute as well. But it was also mentioned that potentially Riot could have done something differently here, right? Because I think the teams, given it is a partnership league, the whole idea is that the teams, the organizations and Riot Games, they're meant to be kind of like in this together. There is an argument they could have tried to help those guys a bit more, because they were put at a disadvantage here by arguably the Riot Games decision on the timings. The feeling is that because they qualified for Masters Madrid, the timings of their visas naturally implied, and it was the same for Gen.G, to get stuff renewed on that kind of time frame, naturally meant that they were always going to struggle to get back in time. I think this was probably a known thing, that they were going to have difficulties arriving back in time for the start of the season. And it was the Masters Madrid teams, Loud and Sentinels, that suffered with this, and the other teams didn't. So Riot, I imagine, they feel should either have been better prepared for this eventuality, or, given the eventuality then did happen, could have taken action to mitigate the disadvantage. Because as Toy says, don't want to sound poor, but 10 because I only touched a mouse in the ready room, so basically 1 to 10, how much it was a contributing factor to their results. He says yes, it was absolutely the most important contributing factor. We arrived really tired and spending almost 20 days with no training, no practicing, affect us individually, collectively, and in our decision making. We spent 15 to 16 hours with flights and connections. We prioritized what we wanted to do today. The situation is difficult. Seems like Riot didn't want to help us either. They didn't care, and we did what we could. So, Riot could have come up with a better solution here to get those guys maybe in time, or the obvious one, I suppose, would have been postpone the game maybe, put something else on instead, push that back by a few days to give them a chance, swap around a couple of series, put Loud NRG last night and then bring the Crew Fury game back a little bit earlier just to, try and help the situation. But yeah, the feeling seems to be here from Loud and from Sentinels that, the referees or the decision makers just don't really care. And that's not really the best look for anyone. Also from Brave F though, I did just show this briefly, but, formerly Fnatic player, of course, he's decided to retire from Valorant, so wishing him the best going forward. But a big update because, of course, he was rather a big part of that team's trajectory and development. Also, though, on the various matches around the world, Zekken, again, I don't imagine that he's been serious here. I hope that he isn't anyway. We know that it was pretty funny if you guys saw this yesterday. The Eclipse goes through, obviously, as part of Mexico, through pretty much all of the US at least through the center of the US, from Dallas, pretty much through Texas, all the way up to New York. Then it goes to Newfoundlands. And people like to look at the Eclipse, and sometimes they'll put glasses on, sometimes they won't. And, I saw various discussions around people Googling, why do my eyes hurt? And that seemed to line up pretty well with the exact path of the Eclipse yesterday. But as Zekken says, Eclipse is sick, damaged my eyes, now we won't have practice, now we don't have practice. And I imagine that he's just, talking about this. Zelsis became one with the sun, now we don't have a full squad. So, yeah, hopefully everything's okay on that side. And Curry as well is like, hang on a second, what do you mean? I just got back home. What are you guys talking about? You now need me to summon again because Zekken's eyes are broken and his entire screen looks something like this, which is, when you look at a bright light, your eyes don't necessarily like it. They will probably eventually fix themselves, but you know what people are like, can't trust anyone nowadays. There were, of course, a few games going down in the VCT yesterday. This was rather hilarious, I'm not going to lie, when the coach of Furious said that Crew have the worst duelist in the Americas. Not even in the Americas, but in the entire VCT, and obviously pretty hot statements. Now, as it turned out, it didn't really end up too well for the Fury boys, because the actual duelist of Crew turned out to have a rather good series. We'll get to that in a second, but firstly, the Pacific side. Global Esports versus DRX, that occurs, and DRX do get the dub. So Ben, of course, is coming in. Global Esports, again, they show some promise, but really, I'm still looking back at last year's Global Esports roster, some of the players that they had over there, and the lack of, execution they were able to deliver compared to what those players are now doing today. The likes of Texture, the likes, of course, of Monyet, for example. So, yeah, not ideal. 13-8 on the Ascent on Global Esports pick, and then it was 13-6 on the Lotus. So again, comfortable victory. DRX not at full strength because Flashback has taken a step away for the time being. Hopefully he can be back in due course, but Foxy9 doing a great job still in the starting roster. Mako, all the rest of the guys, and they're still going to deliver enough results here so that it might not matter. Hopefully as and when Flashback can return. We also just had this. Gen.G played their first series up against Talon. Pretty competitive series. It wasn't absolutely emphatic, although that it was still rather comfortable. 13-9, 13-8. So, solid victory for Gen.G. That first half there on the Ascent really put them over the line. And those guys right now, the best team in the Pacific and very nearly the best team in the world. Of course, they had that phenomenal series with Sentinels back at Masters Madrid. We've got to discuss this man, Shy, and what's going on with the boys in the Americas, because this is when the questions have been raised on how balanced these groups really are. We see the same thing actually in the Pacific. I mean, have a look at this when Group Omega is, with the exception of Talon being 1-1 and Gen.G being now 1-0. If Gen.G had lost that series, it'd have been 1-0, 0-1, 0-1, 0-2, 0-2. So it looks to me, and looks to many others, that Group Omega just seems like the stronger group right now. Now, I'm not sure how much this will be maintained over time, and it's a relatively small sample size, but for the first round of games, it definitely feels like, looking at the teams here, that, yeah, Group A is weaker than Group B. And Group B, there are 6 teams and only 3 qualification spots, which is pretty bad. Now, the good news potentially is they have changed the rules here. Because imagine, look at this Group A, for example, just to make sure that it's fully on screen here. Look at this Group A. There are, 0-1, 0-2, 0-2. Let's say T1 or Bleed don't even win a series this entire season. They just lose everything this entire split here. They could be third if Team Secret and Global Esports are actually even worse, right? But the rule is now that you need 2 series wins to qualify for the playoffs regardless. So if you're terrible and the other teams are worse, and actually would go the other way. So it's not guaranteed to be 3-3. If Alpha is really that bad, then Omega can actually get 4 teams to make it potentially instead, even though that's, it's a rule they came up with to deal with this type of eventuality. But we seem to be seeing a similar trend in the Americas as well, because Crew, they take down Furia, and yes, as discussed, Kisnet, after the trash talk there from the Furia coach, had a rather good showing here. Really, Heat, though, was probably the star of the show. 1.48 rating, did a phenomenal job on the fade and on the KO. Nozwa here on Furia now as well. He had a nice little 1v3 at a time, but it wasn't enough. But Crew take the victory, right? So yeah, Furia not with the start they wanted. This is, what is it, right? Messi's team versus Neymar's team or whatever. And Crew got the 13-7 victory on Lotus. Icebox, though, despite being their pick, went the other way. But on the Breeze side, it was relatively comfortable 13-7 after those 6 straight offensive rounds when Heat really came to play. So yeah, congrats to Crew. They get a victory on the boards. But this is now how it looks like in the Americas. So if you thought it was one-sided in the Pacific, then, well, have a look at this, because as it stands over in, and Sentinels even say, perfectly balanced, right? This is when, if you are Sen, you gotta think, damn, these groups are very interesting. Not just for Sen. I mean, Sen I think should be fine, but any team in this group, I mean, it is pretty stacked, isn't it? This Group A. G2, NRG. G2 looked really good in their first series. NRG looked really good in their first series. Sentinel's the best team in the world right now. Crew, sure, maybe they're not great, but they performed well yesterday and obviously always have a high potential ceiling. We've seen that plenty of times before, such as their LCQ run last year. And then Cloud9, who seemed better than expected as well, was in Group Omega. The feeling is that EG are pretty bad, Fury are probably pretty bad, MERBR are probably pretty bad, I guess we'll see. 100T might be somewhat overrated, same with Lev, and then they've got Loud, who I still think are good but had a hard time in their first series. So yeah, I don't think these groups seem especially balanced to me. And what is that going to look like as the season progresses is a major question in these various regions. Time will tell. These teams have played 1 series each. This type of eventuality probably was somewhat inevitable, but nonetheless, we're going to have more series, and apparently Oxy, and maybe this is just a bit tongue-in-cheek really, but Oxy, of course, and the Cloud9 boys, they're going to play EG soon enough, and if Cloud9 crush EG, for example, then it probably really does show that these groups are not especially as fair as they might have otherwise been. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.